just the act of asking for it is empowering, because we could have just sat by waiting, wishing, wondering, but we didn't. We stepped forward, we spoke up, and we asked. And even if you get a no, you can't help but feel good.
This is By Joyan Season 2. I'm your host, Joyan Chan, and every Wednesday we bring you inspiring stories, powerful message, and fun conversations with me and my special guests and friends, and it's my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. This podcast is for you if you're looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. Now let's dive into today's episode and get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Our guest today believes that if you don't ask for what you want at work, at home, or in life at large, you are cheating yourself. He's fascinated with the question of why so many of us don't ask for what we want and how can we ask effectively. He offers an entertaining blend of hands-on solutions and inspiring stories in his recently released book, The Big Ask: Unlock the Possibilities in Your Work, Life, and Dreams with Courageous Requests. The Big Ask features exclusive stories from his conversations with a wide range of people who succeeded because they asked, even when what they wanted has seemed hopelessly out of reach. So guys, help me in welcoming the author of the inspiring book, The Big Ask, Paul Quinn.
Thanks, Joyan.
Really excited to have you here today. So, all right, before we talk about your book and, why did you write this book, things like that, let's talk about why asking yourself, what do I want, is such a powerful yet often overlooked question in life.
Oh, it is an overlooked question. There are so many reasons why we don't ask what we want. And like you're saying, the first thing is we don't begin to do the kind of self-exploration to figure out what it is we do want. Why? Because we have family, friends, and society telling us what we want, or we are so distracted with parenting or school or just with our phones, our devices, that we get pulled away from what we really want. Another possible reason why we don't know what we want is because if we know what we want, then we become accountable to do something about it. And that usually means an ask of some kind. But if I think that by asking for what I want, I'm going to hear no, or I'm not going to have the resources to back it up, then I'll shy away from making that ask. And the last thing is, we tend to put things in the negative. Instead of asking for what we want, we say what we don't want. And that's kind of like telling the GPS, I don't want to go to the airport. Until we tell that GPS that is ourselves what we do want, we will not get far. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it's knowing where you are and where you're going, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But it can be scary, like you said, knowing what you really want, because that means you have to do something about it, right? You have to, whether it's making the ask, whether it's taking some action, whether it's working hard for your goals, right? It's scary, right. It's uncomfortable. So, so how do you define the big ask?
Well, a big ask is really whatever feels big for you in terms of an ask. For some people, it's asking for $500,000 from an investor. For others, it's asking a friend not to interrupt them while they're talking. I mean, it can be in the interpersonal or a much larger realm. But there are things that I call it sitting on our ask. Things that we want so badly to say and don't. And so we sit on it. But that big ask can be as simple, as I say, as, hey, when we're talking, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't interrupt me, dad, mom, spouse, whomever that is. Or it could be asking someone to be more punctual and not leave you waiting for them. That sounds small, Joyan, But
Yep.
for some people who are really inconvenienced by that, that's a very big ask. And it takes courage because we're concerned that we'll damage the relationship if we ask too much or we ask the wrong way.
Is it possible that you will ask in the wrong way?
Oh, yes. A lot of people will hint instead of really saying what they want.
Mm,
And they think that they're being more polite by hinting. Like, sure would be nice if I had some help with the garage sale this weekend.
right.
And I'm hoping that you'll say, oh, Paul, you need help with the garage sale? I'm happy to help. But a more direct and clear way to do it would be to say, hey, Joyan, I'm doing a garage sale this weekend. Any chance you could help by showing up around 10 o'clock on Saturday? That's a very different kind of outcome that I'm going to get if I'm direct. But a lot of us hint. I've heard that too in the workplace. Someone will say, hey, boss, I hear that our Tallahassee office all got raises. Okay. Well, there's an ask there that's not being made. When's our turn? Or when will you consider giving us a raise in this office? So the things that we assume people will understand that we want is dangerous because we know what we want, but we make the mistake when we assume that others know too.
Yeah. So why are you so fascinated with this concept of making the big ask?
Oh, I love that question. Why am I fascinated with this? Because I'm a nerd, Joyan. I'm a total nerd about human behavior. I look at these things and I've been learning so much over the years about my own asking behaviors. And I think this is such a little thing, asking. It's even a small word, ASK, but it's huge. One of the things that I find really fascinating is that people, even in high-powered positions, let's take a CEO of a huge workplace, can ask anything of anybody and get it. And they'll feel really good about asking. They won't have any problem with it. But that same CEO may be unable to ask his or her spouse to hold them tenderly, or to ask their own child to pitch in around the house. So we all have rules about what is okay and is not okay to ask for. And that interests me. Because I think in that is the key to our self-esteem, the rules we make, the beliefs we have about what's okay to ask for and what isn't. And that also brings in our gender, our social status, our religious background, the family that raised us. We've all learned what it's okay and not okay to ask for. And we won't challenge that until we become aware that we've made that rule or inherited that rule.
So is it important that we challenge our own rules? Like we ask ourselves, before making the ask ourselves, why am I afraid or why am I not asking that ask?
Yes. Right. And that would be a way to start, which is what rules have I made up that it's not okay to ask this? And then to get very clear about what is it I'm afraid of. Am I afraid of rejection? If so, why? Am I afraid that that person saying no will mean that I don't matter much to them? That's a possibility. If I ask for a raise and I'm told no, might that open the channel for my boss to say, you're not valued much around here? So many words. So we can be very afraid to get the no part of that ask. And so a lot of people live their entire lives, Joyan, without asking because their terror of being told no and then feeling diminished and small is so strong. It really serves all of us to ask for what we want.
Right. Yeah. So let's go back to your book. What inspired you to write the book and what is the book about?
Okay. It's called The Big Ask, and it is a book to inspire people to ask more in their lives because I interviewed a few hundred people for this book and wound up only using about 85 stories because it actually pointed out the fact that most people don't ask. Of the hundreds of people I talked to, most did not have a big ask story. And they admitted that they are reluctant to ask. And that would lead to conversations about how they feel they're being left out of their own lives. And so the stories that are in there are about people who wanted something badly enough to ask for it, who also believed that it was okay to ask. In other words, that they weren't violating any social rules or anything like that by asking. Also, people that believed they were worthy of the ask. They were worthy of asking. And that stops a lot of us right there. We just don't feel we're worthy of the ask. And also, do we believe it's possible to get what we ask? If I don't believe it's possible, why bother asking? So there's an element of imagination and our capacity for hope when we ask. And then the last part is, do we have the skill? Because a lot of people are unsure of how to approach. I mean, we approach different people in different ways. Depends on the attitude you bring. You don't ask the head of a company the same way you ask a friend. Most of us don't. You don't ask a parent the same way you might ask someone else. So there is an expectation for how we are better suited to present that ask. And it helps to be flexible so that if you just have one way of asking, well, that's going to limit you. You need to be able to, sometimes an ask will need to be strategic. And sometimes it pays to blurt it just to be spontaneous. I have a good spontaneous story for you. My friend Pat Hawk was a very successful saleswoman. And when she retired, she was moving from her 2-bedroom condo to a 1-bedroom. So it was all happening really fast. She needed to sell a lot of the stuff in her condo in order to make that move, that downsize. Well, she got an idea. She thought, I'm just going to go to the local resale shop and ask around, just randomly, people who needs furniture. And she did that. It was just an inspiration. And she asked 4 people in this shop, and they all said, no, I'm not looking for furniture. But one woman said, yes, I am looking for furniture. My husband and I just moved here. Pat said, why don't you come over this afternoon, have a look at what I'm selling? Husband and wife came over that day. They walked all around Pat's apartment, her condo, and she sat on the couch waiting. And then when the couple was done, they came in the living room. The husband had his hands behind his back. He's rocking on his feet. And he said, how much for everything? And she sold everything, including the lamp fixtures, to that couple that day. They wrote a check, and the check was good because it cleared. And then when she moved at the end of the month, his trucks were there, and they took everything but the stuff that she obviously was taking for herself. So a spontaneous ask, when we trust our intuition rather than overthink it, can also be helpful.
Wow, that's a good story.
Yeah.
Is a story in the book as well?
Yes. There's also strategic asks where we have to really be careful and plan. I interviewed a couple that was on Shark Tank. They asked Mark Cuban for $500,000 and they got it. And in the interview, they told me about why they targeted Mark Cuban and not the others. And it wound up being one of the most show-stopping moments in the history of that show with how they asked him. So that too is in the book. That's called a teaser, by the way.
Yeah. And I know you also interviewed some of the famous people for the book.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing who are these people?
Sure. Jane Lynch, she's a 5-time Emmy winner. She's best known for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Only Murders in the Building, Glee. And she has a great story in the book about the time that she had to ask for feedback, which a lot of people are afraid to do. Because again, what if we're told that what we want the feedback on isn't worth much? And that was her fear going in. I also interviewed someone who you won't recognize. Her name's not known, but she's very famous. And her name is Susan Bennett. And she was the original voice of Siri in North America. So before Susan came on the scene, Siri was a concept. And she went into the recording studio and turned Siri into the voice that we all new for years with the iPhone. I think it was the iPhone 4S back in the day. And I've got a few other people too. I've got Kevin Sessoms. He's an award-winning journalist, best known for Vanity Fair. He's done the cover stories for Beyonce and Matthew McConaughey, Tom Cruise, Madonna, Cher. And I talked to him about what it is to ask in a conversation or an interview when you don't have a script. How do you just open yourself up to what that person in that conversation has to offer? Because a lot of us tend to have our pet topics. We have our little backpack of, well, I can always talk about this. But in a really good conversation, we don't know where it will go.
I love that. Yeah, and that's how I like podcasts to be, right? It's all about
Yes.
that. Because you mentioned all these people, do you personally know them, or you make the big ask by asking them to be on your book, like to interview you, like all these people.
Right.
Yeah.
Jane Lynch, I went to college with. So she and I have been friends ever since college. So that was an easy ask.
Mm.
The other people I had to approach cold. In other words, I didn't know them. But another really good thing, and you being an entrepreneur, Joyan, I think is very important. Asking for referrals is so key to success, because after every interview I did, and again, I interviewed hundreds of people, although only 85 or so are in the book, I would say to them, who else do you think would enjoy talking to me for this book? And not everyone had a referral. Not everyone could think of someone that they thought would enjoy it, but many did. And through that, I got to meet people I never would have met on my own without asking for referrals. But the other famous folks I met either through referrals or through just contacting them cold and hoping for the best. And it was fun. It was exciting because there's nothing personal in it for me. If they say no, it's not like they're rejecting Paul Quinn. They're just saying no. And people have their own reasons for saying no, and you move on. Yeah, that's the answer to the famous part.
Yeah, but I want to talk to you about rejection, because I believe that is the biggest fear why so many people don't ask for what they want. Even for me personally, when I reflect on why don't I make the ask, it's because of the fear of rejection, right? And so how do you, because obviously you are not afraid of rejection based on what you just said. So how do you help people, or what do you recommend, like strategies for people to handle a no or rejection and not letting it shut us down?
Such a good question. I think what you're asking for is the emotional side of it. How
Yeah.
do I keep my self-esteem intact
Yeah.
if I hear no? I think the truth of that is that there is no one answer for that. There just isn't. A certain amount of self-talk can help. If I go into a situation in which I think a no is likely, I can remind myself, if I hear no, I'm still okay. I might hear no at the end of this conversation, and I'm still okay with that. Even if I don't quite believe that when I say it, it's a good way to start, to say, this is not about me personally. So that's helpful. The other thing is, if you hear no, and it's not about feeling rejected, but feeling curious, why are they saying no? A lot of us just take that no at face value. Instead of probing, I call it probe the no. So when I hear no, I might say, can you give me an idea about what's behind that no? Or what would I need to do or say to get a yes in this situation? Or maybe even who could say yes? Or one that's also pretty powerful and takes people off guard is to simply ask, what would you do if you were in my situation? Of the person who's just told you no. Because oftentimes that can open up a whole new area where they can give you advice, they can give you leads, they can give you resources. And if we don't set them up as an adversary, but as someone that could help us, that's a really good question to ask.
Yeah, I really love that. That's so powerful. Like, question the no, right? Ask them
Yeah.
back the question, why did you say no? Right? Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna try that next time. Mhm.
You could even be playful and so tell me, sir, if I were to come back next week and ask you again, as if I had never asked you before, what would make my ask more effective with you? Getting them to think almost creatively, playfully. Well, I tell you, if you came back next week and asked me again, I might say, don't ask in a way that suggests that I'm going to say yes. Have a little bit of humility. Who knows what they might say?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing. That's really a great tip. Now, the reason why I asked that because I know you also write about the three core elements of every successful ask.
Yeah.
So, something that you already mentioned, or if not, what are these three successful asks? I mean, the core elements.
Yeah, I think I did mention those, and that was we have to want something badly enough to ask for it. We need to believe that it's possible, that we're worthy of it, that it's okay to ask, and we have to have the skill to ask for it. But I think another thing that entrepreneurs in particular need to know is that when we ask, even that risky ask, the one that a lot hinges on, just the act of asking for it is empowering because we could have just sat by waiting, wishing, wondering, but we didn't. We stepped forward, we spoke up, and we asked. And even if you get a no, you can't help but feel good about the man or the woman you are that asked that and said it and did it. I think we have to acknowledge our courage, Joanne. We need to, when we are courageous, we need to say, yes, I was courageous and I need to feel good about that.
Yeah, so true, because it really takes courage, right? So would you recommend for someone listening right now? Because I do know a few of my listeners, they are, struggling with confidence, low self-esteem, and what if they really it feels so scary to make the big ask? Do you recommend, starting with small requests to first build the courage for that big ask?
Yes, yes. In fact, I have a cousin who's a therapist, and she works with people who have extreme social phobias, people that can barely look another person in the eye, let alone ask them for something. And she gives them homework, Joanne. So she will have these folks go out to businesses, not businesses, but to shops, little boutiques, where um, there's even a sign that says restrooms are for customers only, or no restrooms for customers. And their assignment is to ask, may I use the restroom? Whether they bought something or not. Now that might sound small, but it helps them if they can do that 2 or 3 times and get no, and
Yeah.
still realize their feet are below them, they're still breathing, they're still a worthwhile human being. Like you're saying, these little incremental steps can help until we can ask more boldly. Another one is rehearsing. I interviewed Jeffrey Breslow. Jeffrey Breslow is a very successful toy designer in Chicago, and he's designed many toys we've heard of. But when he, as a young man, wanted to work for one of the key toy manufacturers in Chicago, toy designing companies, and this is back in the late 60s when $10,000 a year you could live on. That was a good living. And he stood in front of his mirror and he practiced saying to himself, I'm worth $10,000 a year. I'm worth $10,000 a year. I'm asking for $10,000 a year from this new position. Day came, he went to the interview, and when it came to the guy who owned the company asking, how much do you want? He said, sir, I want $10,000. And the man said, that's a lot of money for a kid your age. And he says, and I'm worth it, sir. He couldn't have done that without that rehearsal. So rehearse, rehearse, rehearse it. Ideally with a friend. A mirror is kind of tricky because then we're just looking at how we look and we're judging ourselves for how we look. No, work with a friend and role play. And this can be whether you're asking for a raise on the job asking for a date. It can also work if you're asking for someone to change a troubling behavior, whatever that might be. And that's a tough ask. It could also be asking for the truth, because there's a section in the book, Joyan, about asking for truth. And that is one of the most difficult things we can ask, because depending upon what we learn, the truth can liberate us or it can level us, or both. But it takes courage to ask for the truth.
Yeah. So you also write about the other important question, which is what if, asking ourselves what if.
Yeah.
So are you saying that, before we make the ask, we should ask ourselves, okay, what if the person says no? What if he said yes? What if this? What if that? Like, do we play out the scenarios, different scenarios in our head before making the ask? Like, why is it so?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I think the only scenario worth playing through is, what if I get this? What if I get yes? Yes, in your back pocket, you can have what if I get no. But the only value in having that is knowing that you're deciding now. You're making the executive decision that it will not destroy you if you hear no. But then once you've made that decision, let that go. There's no more profit in asking what if I hear no. Once you've answered it, move forward. But the what if that is really exciting is, what if I get yes? What if we move forward with this? And one little thing I love, this is such a great little affirmation. I think you and your listeners are very familiar with affirmations. I am a confident person. I am moving forward with grace and ease. Those are great. But I've got a playful one for you that tends to be just as effective. And that is, why is it so easy? Give you an example. Why is it so easy to ask for a raise and get it? Why is it so easy to ask this hot person for a date? Why is it so easy? I don't get it. Where we almost make it like it's a game and we take it very lightly. Why is it so easy? In a way, we're sort of kidding ourselves, or we're fooling ourselves, because we feel very tense about the ask, right? But when you say, why is it so easy? Why is it so easy to ask for an exception? Why is it so easy to ask for a scholarship when I'm told that it's really hard to get scholarships? Well, why is it so easy for me? There's an element of playfulness that frees us up from hammering away at the I will do it and I am good enough. Do you hear the difference?
Yes. Yeah.
Why is it so easy? It makes it a little bit more relaxed and more fun and a little bit more humorous as we prepare for that big ask.
So you're saying, okay, when we ask ourselves, when we say that, like, why is it so easy? Do we verbally say, like, answer the question?
Yes, but not with the person. This is just like a mirror exercise. That's you do with yourself.
Yeah.
Just for fun, like when you're walking to the setting or the situation in which you're going to be making that big ask, just keep it light and easy. And it's a way to get your body feeling like, hey, I've already got this. And there are times when I will do this, where that kind of conviction does help us through. And sometimes it doesn't work. So this is just another tool, Joyan. I'm not saying it's the way to do it, but it is one more tool, because God knows we, as entrepreneurs, we need every tool at our disposal. We need to be able to be flexible with how we live our lives, how we ask, how we are with other people, and staying light in our step.
Yeah. So are there times when it's better not to ask for what we want?
Yes.
Oh really?
Oh, yes. Yes. I don't mean to sound so dramatic, but there are times when, for example, I don't want to ask someone if I know it will be a genuine hardship for them to do what I ask. That takes any pleasure of asking from me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to pressure someone like that, unless it's their job to do it. sometimes an ask can be a hardship, but if that person's you can ask the waiter, please reheat my soup. You're not hurting their feelings. That's their job to please you.
Yeah.
But another thing that I think is not good to ask is, I don't want to ask something of someone that I would not do for them. So, if I would not take you to the airport at 4 a.m, I'm not going to ask you to do that for me. Just an agreement, kind of an integrity agreement. I'm also not going to ask you if I suspect that by asking you, you're going to hold it over me for a long time. You're going to always remind me, Paul, remember, I did that favor for you back in, 1998. That might not be worth it. That's a kind of a blackmail. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is probably the most obvious. If someone will expect some sort of creepy compensation for giving me what I want, no. I think a lot of women can relate to that. They don't want to ask for something that would put them in a difficult position where someone would feel like they want something that's unrelated to the ask in return.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah. Since you bring that up, I mean, do you think there is a difference between women and men? Like, do you think women struggle with asking for help more than men? And why is that?
Oh, that's so interesting. That's a show in itself. Yes, there's a lot of evidence about that. And by the way, I can recommend for your listeners, Joyan, there's a Dr. Deborah Tannen. She's out of Georgetown University. She writes exclusively about the difference in male-female communication styles. And what shows up again and again is that women do tend to find it easier to ask for things like help and favors and emotional support, whereas men find it very difficult to ask for help and emotional support. In fact, I interviewed Dave Dahl in the book, and Dave Dahl he no longer does. He sold the company, but he created Dave's Killer Bread, which is a big bread brand here in the States, at least. Well, he served jail time. He was in prison 4 times for all kinds of offenses. And it was his 4th time in prison, and he was extremely depressed. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? But he said that in prison, you don't ask for medications for mental illness. You don't ask for depression medications because it makes you weak. And he was concerned that if word got around the prison that he'd asked for medications to aid his depression, it would mark him as weak. And in the prison system, that's like a death sentence. So he finally couldn't take it anymore. He did make that ask secretly, but he credits the life that he got back for himself to those medications. And the pressure not to ask was enormous. Being a man, because men don't like admitting that we have a weakness, and B, admitting in an all-male population where the stigma is intense. So, and then he went on to lead this incredibly successful business. But yeah, so for men, it's hard to ask for help, and for women, it's hard to ask a lot of things. And also, yet it's easier for them to ask because, unfortunately, the stereotype is that women need help. Mm-hmm. Women being the softer, more delicate, less capable sex. I'm talking about sexism, of course. A woman can ask for directions, and a man in particular will enjoy telling her how to get from A to B. Because I'm feeling like a knight to your damsel. I'm feeling like, oh, look, I get to be the big man by helping this young woman. Men don't have that same luxury. A man to ask for directions in that sense might be seen as incapable. I mean, these are old stereotypes, Joyan, and yet they still hold. I have interviews in the book of people, a man who's the son of a pilot who said that, he was in Tel Aviv and he was terribly lost. And he wandered around for hours rather than ask someone for directions. Now, how crazy is that? Talk about
Yes.
the rules for what's okay and not okay to ask. One other thing, though, about male and female communication and asking, women tend to apologize before
Yes.
asking and also after they've asked. And that's regardless if it's a yes or a no. Does that sound, you've seen that? You said
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah,
I I'm sorry, but you see, I'm sorry, but I have to agree. I just did that.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
I mean,
it's just sort of ingrained, isn't it? Yeah,
why is that? Yeah, now that you mention it, I mean, this is obvious and it's quite sad, when you think about
yeah,
that. Like, why do we have to apologize for 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 everything? Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah. By the way, there's a story in the book by Jim Liu, and Jim Liu's parents were from China. And so he grew up as the son of immigrants. And Jim, who also spoke at my book launch party a few weeks ago, retold the story that's in the book of the time when he was a little boy and he and his parents went to a neighbor's house and she had a dish of candy on the table. And he asked if he could have a piece of candy. And Jim's mother went into just a huge huff saying, "How dare you ask for candy?" And she apologized to the neighbor that her son would ask for candy. And the neighbor, of course, said, "Of course he can have a piece of candy." Well, decades later, like 25 or 30 years later, Jim was visiting that neighbor. And she says, "Oh my gosh, you're the boy who asked for candy." She remembered 30 years later. And Jim said it's because in the Chinese culture, one doesn't ask. One waits for to be invited. But to ask of one's own volition is considered a little bold. And of course, this is cultural, but it's also generational, and that could be changing in many ways. But when Jim was growing up, this was very much the cultural ethic: is you don't ask, you wait until you wait your turn.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, to a certain extent. Yeah. Yeah, I believe it's partly is also, the culture and, the beliefs that you learn when you were young, right? And that's why today you're struggling to make the ask. Do you think it's worth it to revisit our childhood to see maybe something that happened in the past, which is why we're struggling today to ask for something?
oh, absolutely. I think childhood is a good place to start.
Right.
A woman, Muriel Pate, whose story is in the book, said that when she was a kid, her birthday and her brother's birthday were not celebrated.
Mm,
There was no cake, no gifts, and they never asked their parents for anything because money was very tight.
yeah.
And so to ask for what you wanted was to shame your parents because they didn't have the money to give you what you wanted.
Wow.
And she says that she's a psychotherapist, by the way, and that followed her into adulthood, where she would be reluctant to ask for what she wanted. And she realized it was this little girl still alive in her that was sort of cowering, wondering, is it okay? Dare I ask for what I want? And that's very real for people. It's very real.
Mm,
And unless we shine the light on that unexamined part of ourselves, it's probably going to continue to hold us back. I am a presentation coach. I help people present more effectively, usually in corporate settings. With the book, I am loving talking to audiences about asking. And in doing so, I hear, people tell me their ask stories and they ask questions. And what's fun is that, yeah, while I'm not a life coach, it's a coaching kind of vibe when I get to talk about this because people have insights, experiences, questions, and we all kind of team up and sort of solve it for each other. What is it to ask? But what's fun about even this conversation, Joyan, is that I'm hoping that your listeners will look at asking in ways they haven't
yeah.
maybe before this conversation, because we tend to think of it as it's just transactional. Please pass the salt. Or could I have your extra blanket? But so much of asking requires self permission. If it's not okay with us, we're not going to ask. We have to first make it okay with ourselves before we can ask. Otherwise, we will zip it. Do you have any big asks? Has there been a major big ask in your life or two, personally or professionally, that you can think of?
It's interesting they will ask that because like this is the first time that I am talking to someone about making an ask, on my podcast. So to be honest, I have not been aware of, that's courageous ask, you should be asking the skills in asking things like that. So before our interview, actually, I asked myself, is there something that I really want and I'm not asking for it, But I cannot think of anyone, I couldn't think of anything. How about you? What is your next big ask? Yeah.
Well, yeah, gee, what would that be? I kind of thought you might ask that. I should have had an answer. I think what the next big ask for me, yeah. Well, I don't know if it comes down to an ask, but put it this way. Writing a book is such a solitary experience. You're just you and your computer.
Mm.
And of course, the people I was interviewing. But now I have to give myself permission to be the spokesperson for the book. I'm not used to being in front of the camera. I
Okay.
used to be an actor decades and decades ago.
Yeah.
But once you've been out of that for a while, you lose it. So this is all kind of take a big gulp stuff for me to publicly present myself as someone who's starting discussions about asking. I don't even call myself an expert on this, Joyan, because I leave that to the academics, the people that do the actual studies.
Mm.
But I am someone who's fascinated with the topic and who loves communicating it with other people to hopefully get that aha in them about their own beliefs and attitudes and plans around asking.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that question. I mean, it's inspired me to really, ask myself, what do I want? What is something that I want? What is my big ask? What is something I can ask for that could change my life, improve my business, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And also knowing that right now there are three big asks that I'm not even aware of. Three things that I can ask in my life that it hasn't occurred to me yet. There's always something that we've not yet acknowledged. But when we're asking or when we're doing it, we're going, of course, why did I not see this or imagine this before?
Yeah.
But it's always there. It's always there. And I think that there's a failure of our imagination because we don't allow ourselves to ask what if, because that can be a scary question. What if I were to challenge myself to do this, whatever this is? The scary part of that is that we're holding ourselves accountable to find a way to do that. And if we don't do it, then we can use that as an excuse to beat ourselves up. On the other hand, what if we succeed?
Mm.
That's the far more encouraging question. What if we succeed?
I think, yeah, back to imagination, because it's something that's not in our awareness, I think people are just, of course, at large, people are just being realistic. Like, it's not possible, I'm not going to get a pay raise, I'm not going to succeed in business, right? Things like that, right? We are being realistic. That's what they call
Right.
themselves, right? Yeah.
About this being realistic and knowing and allowing for what's possible. Quick story from Scott Martin, a New Yorker. He and his friend Marie went to Machu Picchu, or that was the plan. So they went to Peru and they hired a tour guide just for them. And they met the tour guide at this town of Cusco, which is about 4 hours outside of Machu Picchu. And when the tour guide greeted them, she was extremely upset and apologetic. What she said to them was, there have been mudslides all night long, and the tracks to Machu Picchu are almost completely covered. No one's getting to Machu Picchu by train. Well, Scott and Marie were devastated because they had been planning this trip for a very long time. And there they were, day one, and they're told they can't get to Machu Picchu. So Scott Scott said that he's not the kind of person that believes there's no way. So he said to her, we've come so far. Is there anything you could do to make this happen for us? Anything you could do? And the way he asked her, there was such belief from him in that there was something that she looked at him kind of baffled, like, let me see what I can do. She said, wait here in the bar. I'll come back. Well, a couple hours later, Marie and Scott were waved over by the tour guide. She says, follow me. She takes them out to an empty field, and a helicopter lands. It's an old Army issue helicopter rattling like crazy. They get in the helicopter, and there's about 4 or 5 other tourists in the copter. Now that's a 4-hour train ride to Machu Picchu. They flew over the Andes in 30 minutes and got to the base of Machu Picchu, at the base of that mountain, took a bus up, did the rest on foot, and had Machu Picchu to themselves. Now, what I would ask your listeners and you is, would you have, if the tour guide had told you that, would you have figured, well, I guess the universe has another intention for us. Let's order a margarita, make the best of it. Or would you, like Scott did, have held on to a possibility and asked from that sense of possibility?
I think I would.
You would have asked?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Like, is
That's
there
great.
a way? I think that question itself is so powerful. Like, is there a way? Is it, to make this happen?
Yes.
There are so many ways, right? There's so many possibilities.
Right. A friend of mine, his wife is an aspiring novelist, and she wanted an office space. And they live in Evanston, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago. And there was a nice office building. And Bob went up to the guy that runs the rentals, and he says, you wouldn't by any chance have an office that rents for about $300 a month, would you? Well, it's a pretty long shot question, right? Who has anything for $300 in a major city? And he said, yeah, actually we do. It's got no windows and it needs some fixing up, but we do. Well, when Mary Beth, his wife, saw it, she loved it and fixed it up. And now she's got a $300 a month, beautiful writing space. In fact, I interviewed her from her writing space in this building, which she pays $300 a month. And that's because her husband said, you wouldn't happen to have, and yet they did.
That is not a big ask, isn't it? Because that is like giving a hint, like we mentioned earlier, we talked about earlier. Like, wouldn't you? It's like a hint, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of right. It's kind of a hint. I call it a backpedaled question because it's assuming that the answer will be no, which makes it kind of safe. You wouldn't happen to want to go out with me Friday, would you? I mean, that allows you to say no. It's not the most positive and forceful or strong way to make an ask, but in that case, it really worked.
I guess, yeah, in different settings, to different people, it works differently. So you just have to figure out the style that works for you, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure we have talked about so many different ways. Paul has given all of us so many different tools and questions and stories. I love all the stories, and it's so refreshing talking to you, Paul. And thank you so much for sharing so generously with me and my listeners. It's really been so helpful. So is there anything that perhaps you really want to talk about, but I didn't let you or didn't ask you?
Oh, yes, there's tons of stuff, but we only have so much time. But I will say that if your listeners, you or your listeners, and your listeners, if there are any big asks in your life that you'd like to share with me, I'm planning a second book. And those stories that don't make it in the book, I'll be putting in my blog. I have the Big Ask blog. My website, by the way, is bigaskbook.com. And people can write to me with their big ask stories. And the way it works is that if it's a big enough story, if it's worthy of the book or the blog, I will follow up and ask more questions about it and talk with you. That's kind of a fun project.
Yeah, it sounds fun, and thanks for the opportunity. So, guys, you heard that. So your homework for today, I would say, have to go make your big ask, and write to
Yes.
Paul and submit your story, and maybe you'll get featured in his next book. So,
Even without the featuring part, ask big.
yes.
Just take this as an opportunity to go out there and ask, whether that's personally or professionally or both. And because it is an empowering thing to ask, it's empowering. And the beauty of this is when you ask and you get a yes and you tell other people about your ask, it inspires them in turn to make the big ask. So it's all about paying it forward.
Love that. Thank you so much for everything that you do. So guys, go buy the book. Share this episode with your friends, family, share it on your IG story, and tag me and tag Paul and let us know what's your biggest takeaway. And remember, go make your big ask today. We'll see you soon again in the next episode. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Joyan.
Thank you again for tuning into Find Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and tag _podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.